Heist is a meta that has historically always been dominated by two things: high mobility and damage. In fact, even before the game mode got its big rework back in 2018 to having both teams defend a safe instead of just one, brawlers like Bull, Daryl, and El Primo used to always be strong options in the Heist meta because they had the highest mobility supers in the game at the time, with Bull and Daryl being particularly favored as they had the highest damage up close and they excelled at using their supers to run it down from across the map to melt the enemy's safe. And today, despite over 60 new brawlers, gadgets, gears, second star powers, and hypercharges all being added to the game, the meta is still nearly the exact same few brawlers, all being used for the exact same roles as they were 7 years ago, just with newer and fancier tools. Brawlers like Nita, Jessie, and Crow were given a star power, a gadget, and a hypercharge respectively, which lets them shred the safe with just one super. Long-range DPS brawlers like Colt and Rico are still priority picks depending on the map, now with star powers and gadgets that let them spam out infinite projectiles and melt the safe in just a single push. High DPS throwers like Dinah and Barley still make the game insufferable on maps with lots of walls. The only things that have really changed in the Heist meta are the maps. Snipers are a lot better now with how open a lot of these maps have become, but more noticeable than the map pool changes are the new brawlers that now fulfill the tank role. Because while Bull and Daryl were also given gadgets or star powers that let them run it down and melt the safe faster than ever, 2023 saw the release of a certain train brawler that would change the Heist meta forever and pretty much put Bull and Daryl out of a job, forced to watch from the corner as their main role gets stolen away from them by an Italian in a wheelchair. And if an unstoppable train that could repeatedly barrel down the map off respawn to deal thousands of damage wasn't bad enough, in early 2024, Heist was about to see a second plane hit the metaphorical tower that was the Heist meta in the form of the hottest new assassin / K-pop star idol, and the subject of today's video, Melodie. Able to shred the safe from 100 to 0 with just her basic attack and a super that lets her travel across the map almost as fast as Chuck, Melodie quickly cemented herself not just into the Heist meta but into the hearts of Brawl Stars players everywhere, for some reason. But it's not just the young male player base who's been showing their love to the Dancing Queen. She had a very high pick and ban rate in the monthly final that happened recently, and Brawl Stars themselves have recently been showing quite a bit of love to the Melodie as well, with her getting her own songs, 2 of them, receiving a hypercharge before a lot of other older new brawlers in the game, getting a 12-win challenge letting you unlock her for free, and even getting a pretty sick Brawl Pass skin this season based on the Good Randoms band that's starting to look a lot like those Brawl China skins that everybody's been asking to be added to the game. I love my edgy purple wings! Now, Melodie is a very unique brawler, and even though she's considered pretty brain-dead and no skill and unfair to play against on her strongest mode Heist, using her in other game modes actually takes a bit of practice to make work, since unlike most other assassin brawlers who can just spam auto-aim to get kills, getting kills with Melodie takes good movement to deal any damage, and combine that with her being one of the newer mythic brawlers in the game and therefore harder to obtain for most players, in the year after her release, Melodie hasn't seen too much use outside of Heist despite being decently strong in every meta. But of course, that's all changed recently thanks to the help of that Melodie challenge, letting tons of players unlock her for free, and a couple seasons ago, I actually happened to do a Melodie ranked challenge where I pushed to masters playing only Melodie solo queue in order to brute force my way into learning her inside and out, picking her on every map and mode regardless of the situation, which was a completely painless endeavor and totally didn't take me like 20 hours of just playing the game across several days. If you want to see the final part of that push, you can check it out on my gameplay channel, link will be in the description. But now that I've gone through the ringer and have mastered the Melodie, and with a bunch of players recently unlocking her and being unfamiliar with the complexities of her kit, I figure now's as good a time as ever to do a deep dive on everything you need to know about playing and countering this brawler, from the broader, more general information that everyone should know, to the more smaller, more technical details and game sense knowledge that most people lack in this game overall. We'll cover best loadouts, best and worst maps and modes outside of Heist, and even analyze some professional Melodie games so that by the end of this video, you too can take advantage of Melodie in your games when she's available, because for some godforsaken reason, people occasionally forget to ban her on even her best maps. And even if you know you'll never want to play a brawler like Melodie, this video can still help you understand how to counter her in your games better, because the best way to learn how to counter a brawler is to learn how to play that brawler. And we've all been there where we forget to ban Melodie on Heist, and the enemy team takes her and pushes our shit in. So to make sure that exact situation never happens to you in your ranked games again, let's go ahead and jump right into how to play Melodie, only the 6th most sexualized brawler. Don't ask me how I know that. So let's first start off by going over Melodie's kit, because even though she is a glorified Archero fidget spinner, her kit is surprisingly complex, and there's a couple specific quirks to her abilities that you might not know about, which can make a big difference in your games, regardless of whether you're playing her or playing against her, or regardless of if you've been playing Melodie for a while or only recently unlocked her. For her attack, Melodie shoots out a medium long-range projectile that does 920 damage on hit and travels pretty damn fast with a respectable hitbox, so it's auto-aimable at most ranges unless an enemy is moving side to side at max range. And that max range is pretty long. It outranges brawlers like Stu and Surge, and is comparable to brawlers like Griff and Janet, so as Melodie, you'll actually be outranging a decent chunk of brawlers in the game with your basic attack, and that can potentially avoid feeding brawlers like Stu and Surge their supers, which can be very useful, and I'll talk more about matchups and playstyle later. But 900 damage is pitifully low, and her reload speed is just okay, nothing too crazy, so you're not going to be killing people with just the projectile alone, which of course is because the main use of this attack is to activate those circling notes. On hit, each attack will spawn a note which circles around Melodie for 8 seconds, and on contact deals double the damage of her base attack, so it does 1840 damage, which also doesn't really sound like a lot, but has a lot of potential if you can utilize your movement well. And that brings us then to her super, which is her main mobility tool and the most important tool in her kit. Melodie's super gives you 3 charges of a dash that has a really low animation time. It's one of the fastest dashes in the game, on top of having a really long range. The super itself charges in 5 hits of her attack or circling notes, which isn't too bad as far as super charge rates go, but cycling it is a little finicky because if you have any charges remaining, you actually can't start charging your next super until you've used up all the charges in your current super. And if you die with any charges remaining, you'll respawn with nothing, which I think is secretly kind of bullshit. But even though the super cycling is a little awkward, having 3 really long and fast dashes is great in letting you position around the map, take space, close gaps on people, run away, dodge shots like Stu. Anything that having a lot of movement speed is good for, this super will do well. And while it doesn't deal any damage directly, it can still be used to deal damage to opponents by dashing around them to slap them up with your notes as you pass by. But a lot of noob Melodies, what they'll do with this super is they'll just mindlessly dash into or through their enemy and then deal no damage and die. The key to using this super well and consistently dealing a lot of damage with it is to understand how Melodie notes move. They circle around Melodie in a clockwise direction, which means due to physics reasons, if you circle in an opponent in a counterclockwise direction, the notes will hit more often, increasing your DPS by some mathematical amount. I don't know, I don't want to calculate it. But just know it is substantial, and you'll see every Melodie player in Heist turn their brain off when they come near the safe and play Ring Around the Rosie with that shit like they're Thanos from Squid Game. And its counterclockwise movement doesn't just apply to increasing DPS against the Heist safe. If you move in a counterclockwise motion around the target with your super by dashing to the right of someone, or to the left of them if you're on top in the engagement, it'll increase the chances that they get hit by 1 or 2 notes on each turn, which can deal a pretty decent burst damage. If you make the mistake of dashing around them in the clockwise direction or dashing straight at them, you might get unlucky and not hit them with any notes at all, so dashing to the right of someone is very important to practice since the super is one of Melodie's main engage tools. And if you struggled a lot with playing Melodie before and didn't know about this, once you get this down, Melodie is already going to start feeling a lot stronger for you. Also, while your super is the main way you'll get burst damage with Melodie, if someone is standing right on top of you or inside you, you actually have another option at your disposal. Because when Melodie's attack hits an enemy, the note that spawns actually spawns inside of Melodie first before it starts circling her, kind of like she's giving birth. Which means if someone is right on top of you and you use your attack, that target won't just take 920 damage, but the damage of the note plus the attack, which is 2760 damage, while also charging her super for 2 attacks worth, and that's actually pretty respectable, especially since her unload speed is quite fast as well. You can burst people this way even if you already have 3 notes out too, since each subsequent note hit will refresh her notes by spawning more of them again inside of her. So if someone is right up on your face within kissing distance trying to harass you, don't be afraid to walk into their personal space using your faster movement speed and bursting them down if they don't do that much damage themselves. And on the flip side, if you're facing a Melodie, try not to walk on top of her because that's actually where she'll deal the most damage. In theory, you would think it would actually be better for you to stand inside of this inner circle in between Melodie and her notes, but because Melodie is so fast when she has her notes out, it's probably not possible to consistently do that, and it's usually better off to just stay outside of this circle in general unless you out DPS her up close. And Melodie's fast movement speed is of course all thanks to her main star power, so now let's talk about those. For her star powers, Melodie has a star power that gives 6% extra movement speed per active note. It's iconic, every Melodie you've ever seen is using this one. With 3 notes out, it's basically like having a better speed gear active all the time, and makes Melodie consistently faster than most brawlers in the game. It lets you reposition around people better, dodge shots easier. As Melodie, you're basically always going to use this one, because Melodie's second star power, yes, believe it or not, she does have one, increases the duration of her notes circling you by 2 seconds, which doesn't sound bad as like a standalone balance change, maybe? Nice little quality of life, but her notes already last 8 seconds. If you're hitting your shots, you're usually going to have your notes up anyways. And if you're not getting movement speed from your notes from the first star power, then why do you even need the notes to last longer anyways? If you need the notes to last longer, just hit the enemy again. You'll be regularly shooting and reactivating your notes anyways to maximize DPS. If anything, making your notes last longer might even be detrimental in some cases, since Melodie's notes reveal your position in bushes for some fucking reason, those little shits, so increasing their duration is just walking around with a hit me sign taped to your back for longer This star power needs to be reworked. And me personally, just to throw some ideas out there, I think it would be cool if this star power made it so each note out gives Melodie like a 4% damage reduction maybe instead, just to make it compete with her movement speed star power a little more, because movement speed is so good. If you made this star power do anything else, I don't think people would really use it. And Melodie's biggest limiting factor right now is honestly that her HP is really low for an assassin. Her only way of increasing her health pool outside of gears is just one of her gadgets. So I think this change to her second star power would make you think a lot more about which star power to actually use. And speaking of her gadgets, let's now talk about her gadgets. Melodie's first gadget gives her a temporary shield worth 10% of her max HP per note that's circling her on a 19-second cooldown. 10% of her max HP ends up being 720 HP per note, so with 3 notes you can get an extra 2160 HP for a brief window. It won't make her like a hippo, but it does add a little more beefiness to her health pool, make her live like 1 extra shot, maybe. You'll probably see this gadget most of the time if you've played against any Melodie before on Heist, so they can skip around your safe for longer. It used to be way more broken and pretty much exclusively used, but then it got a big nerf. It's still pretty solid though. Her second gadget is on a 14-second cooldown and temporarily increases the radius of her node's circling path for 5 seconds, which would decrease her DPS, but the gadget thankfully increases the speed at which they rotate too, so it more or less cancels out. This gadget has been on the come up lately as being pretty underrated after the shield got nerfed, because extending the range of your notes means you can hit people sooner, whereas with the shield you might need to spend more time waddling up to people and getting hit in the process to close that gap. So even though you are effectively giving up HP in some cases, that doesn't necessarily make you easier to kill with this range gadget. But which one is actually better? Well, it kind of depends, and it also kind of doesn't. Previously, I've given a lot of positive coverage to the range gadget in my Melodie push. I used it a lot to get a bunch of team wipes early on around the mythic rank and below. But to be honest, as I climbed through Legendary and eventually reached Masters, I mostly find myself just using the shield gadget most of the time. It's probably better overall, and it gives Melodie a lot more consistent value just because, again, Melodie is relatively squishy for an assassin, and that's her biggest limiting factor right now. Especially since when you go in with Melodie, it's usually not going to be a straight 1v1. People will instinctively group up or try to focus fire you as you dive on a target, and with 2 or more people shooting you, you'll get shredded. But with the help of the shield gadget, there's a lot of situations where you might just barely get 1 or 2 kills and survive with less than like 2000 HP, which is all thanks to the shield gadget, right? The range gadget does have a lot of room for pop-off moments though, especially against bad players who might waste their shots and group up more, and that extra range is just enough to sometimes hit several people at once for big team wipes, which can feel amazing. Or it can be used to catch people off guard sometimes because they'll be standing in the range gadget note path without realizing it. But the gadget does have a drawback because it makes Melodie more vulnerable up close since her notes are now so much further away, so you can stand in that safe zone a lot easier, and most of the time, ideally with Melodie, you want to get good enough with her super and positioning to where you don't even need to extend the range of your notes to be hitting people with them, if you get what I mean. And even though the shield gadget has a longer cooldown than ranged, you still get to use the gadget every other life anyways. A 19-second cooldown versus a 14-second cooldown isn't as big of a deal compared to like if the ranged gadget had maybe a 10-second cooldown instead. There's a little bit more potential there with the shield gadget, I think, for consistency and value. That's not to say that the shield gadget is always better though. Like I said, it kind of depends because there are interactions against specific brawlers where range is just better than shield. For example, against brawlers like Jackie, Doug, and RT, who have those circle attacks that will hit you if you get them within your note range, with the range gadget you can keep your distance from them a lot better and can potentially take them out without getting hit at all, which increases your survivability in those interactions way more than the shield gadget would. Also, there are certain maps where you would want to take range over shield, like Canal Grand or Parallel Plays, since you can use your gadget to hit people through the walls with your notes easier there, and brawlers like Jackie and RT are really popular on those maps as well. But overall, most of the time shield is just going to be better, and you can probably get away with using just shield gadget in every situation, since chances are you're not going to be picking Melodie on a map like Canal Grand anyways, unless you're doing some stupid challenge where you're forced to play Melodie everywhere. And if for whatever reason you are subjecting yourself to that form of inhumane torture, you're definitely going to want to unlock her Hypercharge, since that's a big part of what makes her strong. In fact, on its release, Supercell preemptively nerfed Melodie's supercharge rate, making it go from 4 hits to get her super to 5, just because of how much better this Hypercharge makes her. Melodie's Hypercharge, which takes 3 sets of supers to charge, makes each use of her next set of supers give you a special purple note, of which you can have 3, each note dealing 600 damage and lasting 8 seconds each. The notes don't deal a lot of damage and don't charge your super by any meaningful amount, but they do count towards the first star power movement speed boost and the shield gadget shield per note, and with 6 notes out, those numbers are getting bumped up to 36% extra movement speed and 4,320 shield respectively, which is another part of the reason why the speed star power and the shield gadgets are better most of the time since they benefit more from the Hypercharge. Not to mention, the Hypercharge itself gives stats too, a 24% speed boost, which combined with her star power speed boost makes Melodie insanely fast, and it gives a 25% damage boost as well, bringing the note damage from 1,840 to 2,300 damage per hit. Combined with her purple notes damage, the Hypercharge effectively turns her into a highly mobile industrial lathe. One thing you will want to know about the Hypercharge damage boost though is that to actually apply it to your notes, you'll need to respawn all the notes after you activate your Hypercharge, because the notes only take on the damage buffs that were active when they spawned in. They don't take into account new damage buffs that activate while they're already circling. So when you Hypercharge, make sure you have your ammo ready to reactivate your notes in order to get a significant chunk of the damage boost from it. And that pretty much covers most of Melodie's kit, although there's a lot more to her playstyle that we still need to go over, and we'll be watching a few pro games to show you some more case-by-case scenario on that. But before I do those, I want to quickly touch on her gear options, because Melodie in particular has a lot of tough choices for gears. She's like Jean, where she would love to equip basically every gear on at once if she could, but with only 2 slots you're gonna have to make compromises, and choosing the right gears to equip is kind of like asking Mediterraneans which olive oil is the best, or having to choose whether or not to break your pasta in half when cooking, or trying to decide between New York or New Jersey or Domino's for the best pizza. And like all of those examples of very difficult choices without a right answer, every option is valid, and that means that people all have their own take. So to give the impression of an unbiased reporter, I'll go ahead and explain the perks of each gear on Melodie, but the truth is that when it comes to picking the right gears, everyone else is wrong and I'm right, so you should really just ignore any dissenting opinions and only listen to me. For our first gear option, we have the shield gear. Shield gear gives you 900 bonus max HP, and Melodie's biggest issue is, again, that she doesn't have enough survivability going right up to people within tickle distance, since that's where people can usually auto-aim you down while dealing the most damage. So with the help of shield gear, even though it's only 900 max HP, there's actually a lot of times where you might live an engagement at less than 900 HP, at which point you should get down on your hands and knees and start thanking the shield gear for saving your ass once again. There is a drawback to shield gear though, which is that it only regenerates 90 shield per second, which means it'll take 10 seconds after reaching full HP to recharge shield gear back to full. And that's a lot of time to be spent out of a fight. Most of the time you might not even get a full shield back by the time enemies respawn or shoot at you, but either way more max HP is more max HP, so it's still a great option. Next up we have damage gear. Damage gear gives you a 15% damage boost when you're below 50% HP, which is where Melodie usually is at after going in and taking a couple front shots. So damage gear is really good, helps a lot with damage cutoffs, and without this gear, people will sometimes live with very low HP where they otherwise would have died if you had this gear on. Plus, damage will help you shred more in Heist, but even without damage gear, whenever I play Melodie, I don't usually find myself dying while my target lives at low HP that often. Her Hypercharge already turns her into a walking blender. Rather than damage, it's better to just go with whatever makes you survive more on Melodie in my opinion. And that brings us then to the newly reworked gadget gear, which reduces gadget cooldowns by 15%. With the shield gadget, this reduces gadget cooldowns by almost 3 seconds, bringing it down to 16 seconds cooldown, and for the range gadget, it reduces the cooldown by about 2 seconds, bringing it down to 12 seconds. Since the shield gadget is better, I'll focus mostly on that. If you don't have this gear equipped, there are going to be moments where you might be on the brink of getting the shield gadget again, but then die right before it comes off cooldown, since it is a 19-second cooldown by default, which is pretty long. This gear helps you avoid some situations like that, so it's pretty great. But even with the gadget gear, it still doesn't get rid of situations where you die right before getting your shield off cooldown, right? Those moments will still happen, it just kind of kicks the can down the road a little instead, so it's good, but I'm not completely sold on if it's the best one for Melodie. And that brings us then to the vision gear. Vision gear lets you see an opponent's position in the grass for 2 seconds when you hit someone. This is really fucking good. I've glazed vision gear a lot on this channel, and any brawler that has a long-ranged, easy-to-hit attack on a grassy map can benefit from using this gear to keep people low and prevent them from sneaking around or getting passive healing. It's situational, but it's a very valid choice on the right situations. And then for our last gear option on Melodie, but definitely not least, we have health gear, which increases your passive healing effectiveness by 50%. A lot of people don't really understand what this gear does, and they underappreciate it, so just to do a quick rundown, passive healing refers to when you heal up after not taking damage for 3 seconds. Health gear increases the healing from that by 50%. By default, all brawlers heal 13% of their max HP per second, taking around 8 seconds of passive healing to get back to full from 0. But health gear will increase passive healing to 19.5% of max HP per second, which lowers the time to fully heal to usually 5, occasionally 6 seconds of healing. And to give you some context on just how much value this actually is, with Melodie's max HP, 2 ticks of passive healing will normally provide 1,872 health, and so health gear will take that to 2,808 health, which is over 900 more health in 2 ticks. And that means that getting just 2 ticks of passive healing right before or during a fight will already have given you more health from health gear than the shield provided from all of shield gear, and this is true for any brawler with 7,000 HP or more. Health gear is really good for these cases where you need to re-enter a fight quickly, which is basically like all the time since Brawl Stars is such a fast-paced game and respawn timers are nearly non-existent. If you've never used health gear before, imagine if you needed to take 3 less seconds to heal back to full. It's pretty good. but it's especially good on a brawler like Melodie, who has a lot of movement speed and likes to go in and out of fights a lot. And it has great synergy with shield gear too, since it helps you heal back up to full to start recharging your shield gear sooner. Now, if you have a healer on your team like Barry, they can act actually as a budget health gear and top you off instead, but otherwise health gear is very important on a brawler like Melodie. And that pretty much covers all of Melodie's gear options. Obviously I skipped speed gear, but I don't count that one as an option for Melodie because she doesn't usually sneak around in grass anyways, and Melodie's kit already provides a ton of movement speed, so you'd rather just use something else most of the time. So with all that out of the way, if I had to pick just 2 gears of the ones I've mentioned, which ones should I pick? If you had asked me this question before the recent gadget rework, hands down I would have said health and shield, no questions asked, since Melodie's biggest issue right now is that she's lacking in HP and sustainability, which are directly helped by both shield and health gear. So having both will make you live more, which then helps you kill things more and take space more. But with the gadget rework that happened recently, I think it can be kind of more of a personal decision to switch to gadget gear or not. It's definitely very tempting. But me personally, every time I switch off of health or shield gear, I usually find myself dying more and accomplishing less on the map. Even if you die right before getting your shield gadget off, in my experience, it's not as important to have this gadget occasionally clutch up by being available 3 seconds sooner, compared to being able to consistently heal the full HP 3 seconds sooner throughout the course of the game, or consistently having 900 more max HP throughout the course of the game as well, right? They're just more consistent gears. Rather than gadget gear, the really tough choice is actually vision gear, because vision is so goated, and on grassy maps, having it can help you win a few critical matchups against tankier brawlers who might otherwise dodge a few shots, heal up, sneak up on you, and then touch you. And since Melodie has decent range and her projectile is easy to land, she does a good job of keeping vision applied on her opponents like e-girl bathwater on a simp. But even though I am a devout vision gear glazer, I still usually try not to switch off shield and health when I play Melodie because both gears are just that important on this brawler. And on grassy maps, ideally you have a teammate who can take the tanky brawler lane or use the vision gear to scout for you, or maybe you aren't playing Melodie to begin with on a map that grassy. So overall, final picks for the best build on Melodie: movement speed star power, obviously, shield gadget, shield gear, and health gear, with some room for variation in her gadget depending on matchup, and some room for variation in her gears depending on the map and if she has a healer. And that brings us now to Melodie's best maps, modes, and general playstyles. Where should you whip out that Melodie? Where should you try to keep her hidden away in shame? And if you are going to whip it out, how exactly should you do it? Like most other assassins, Melodie is generally pretty good into squishy, low DPS brawlers, supports, snipers, throwers mainly. Using that super and the 2.7k damage per attack can make her burst potential very solid at assassinating low HP targets who can't kill her in 3 shots and a super, especially since with the shield gadget and gear, her total health pool is functionally more like 10,000, and that's not bad for a brawler as mobile as Melodie is. On the flip side though, you do need to keep in mind that her health is only 10k. If you're ever being shot at by 2 or more people, you can and will get torn to shreds, so it'll be really important to do 2 things when going in on enemy brawlers, and that is to juke shots and to bait shots. By juking shots, what I mean is just dodging them, which sounds like a meme advice, but it's actually a lot easier to do on a brawler like Melodie since her movement speed is so fast. Even if she doesn't have the most HP, it doesn't actually matter if in the process of pushing up you dodge every shot and don't get hit in the first place, right? Try to get better with your movement when playing Melodie because it's a big part of her playstyle, and if you want some more tips on specifically dodging, you can check out this guide I made a while back. Most of it is still pretty relevant, even if my videos don't look like this anymore. And for cases where shots are too hard to dodge, or if your movement just sucks, that's where you'll want to start baiting shots as much as possible. Basically, pretend to walk out and get your enemies to waste their ammo while you hide back safely behind cover. If you do this enough times, eventually enemies will waste too many shots and back off or get out of position, which will give you an opportunity to go in while they have less attacks. Ammo counting here will do you a lot of favors. Another thing to watch out for when you're facing against your good matchups is that you're actually going to get outranged by most of them a lot of the time, just because snipers have more range than Melodie on open maps, and throwers will usually sit behind a wall where you can't reach them on closed maps. In games like these, early on you're going to struggle a lot to hit enemies and charge your first super. Especially against good players, they're not going to let you walk up and hit them, they're going to treat you like Stu and try to avoid feeding you hits as much as possible. But similar to Stu, once you can get your first super, and in Melodie's case, set of supers, you'll be able to use those supers to get on top of people and start cycling up your next set, either by killing people or getting in a better position on the map to hit people more easily. And this is where it'll be important when you super in to use all 3 of your supers up as you hit your opponent, because that way you can start charging up your next super in the process of killing them. What some people might do is try to super in a zigzag nearby and then use the last super to land on top of their opponent to then kill them with their notes only to better cycle towards their next super. This is a little matchup dependent though, and it might cost you a shield gadget or your life in the process, so Only do this if you have the HP, gadgets, or time to spare. The better way to engage with Melodie, I think, in most scenarios is to use your supers in a circle around them like we talked about before for better burst damage, and even though you won't get any hits towards your next super in that process of hitting them while you're supering, you can still save any remaining supers to dash on someone else to start charging your super off of them, or if you've used all your supers up, you can still charge your next super as the enemies walk back in off of respawn, right? Once you've already gotten a kill, your positioning is going to be a lot better for you to hit people more easily and recharge your next super. Whether or not to go for the more aggressive play or the passive one, it kind of depends on the scenario. Whatever the case is though, it's super important to keep that super cycling going because Melodie without her super against good players who keep their distance can feel like playing a level 1 Surge or Clancy sometimes. You're just gonna kind of feel useless, and if you die before you get another one, you're going to struggle a lot. Now, I am kind of realizing that it doesn't sound great if a brawler has to do all this to not struggle against their good matchups, but these are more just things to do to avoid the worst case scenario of getting spawn trapped and going 0-5. Most of the time, even if you don't follow all these tips perfectly, it's probably still going to be fairly straightforward to get that first super just because Melodie's range is so long and her movement speed is so fast. And just like with Surge, once you do get that first super, you can farm people pretty hard. A good Melodie who's cycling supers can be very hard to stop because any brawler with a lot of movement speed in this game inherently has a lot of outplay potential and can even beat her weaker matchups. For example, even though she is an assassin, which as a class usually struggles to beat tanks, Melodie honestly does pretty good into most tanks or even other assassins just because she outranges a lot of them and she can edge them using her attack's superior range into a finisher with her super and notes once they're low enough, so long as you don't miss too many shots and let them heal up. But she doesn't do well into all tanks though. There are some tanks that have decent range like Meg and Frank who can fuck Melodie pretty hard, and certain circle attacking brawlers like Jackie, Doug, and RT can be difficult for Melodie since she can't go in with her notes without getting touched back. And of course, as an assassin, she does generally struggle into tank counters, but it kind of depends on the tank counter because sometimes she doesn't do that bad and you can skill diff them. For the tank counters that you'd want to avoid as Melodie in particular though, Surge and Lu, they will eat her ass whole, not just her asshole, but her whole ass in its entirety. Although Melodie does outrange Surge, so you can actually play around him if the map is fairly open by not feeding him any levels and keeping him poked down. Amber will also devour Melodie up with that fireball gadget, plus she outranges Melodie and does a shit ton of damage. And if you ask me, it's kind of bullshit that Amber gets to steal Melodie's whole kit and somehow win that engagement, but that's just my take. If you're playing against Melodie, definitely consider the Amber, especially on Heist. Nita Bear is also really hard to kill for Melodie, same with Juju Pet. Both these brawlers with spawnables can be a fucked matchup for the Melodie player if they can cycle their pets well. Although Melodie does outrange them both, so again, like with Surge, some room for counterplay on an open map so long as your teammates don't troll it. Jackie is a tank who I already mentioned like 5 seconds ago, but just thought I'd mention her again because she's basically a tank counter with that stupid counter crusher star power and suck super, very scary matchup. And of course, can't forget brawlers like Buster and Cord who specifically have a great matchup into Melodie using their supers. For example, Buster's super will eat Melodie's notes, which is really annoying for Melodie, and his pull gadget can suck her up for her to get eaten alive by Buster's teammates since he's usually glued to their assholes like an unwiped shit stain. And against Cord, Melodie loses all her notes when she enters and exits the Shadow Realm, plus she can't use her super in the realm and the enemy Cord gets a movement speed boost there, which means Melodie basically can't do anything to Cord unless he walks into her notes like a dumbass. And even if she survives the realm, she loses her notes again anyways, so she's still just cooked. There's also a few honorable mentions for brawlers that do a lot of damage in general and have a really long range, like 8-Bit, Gus, B, Pearl, Griff, Maisie. Those brawlers can be very scary to face, but with enough jukes and effective super cycling, you can still play around these brawlers, and if I had to rank Melodie's hardest counters in order of scariest to least scary, it would be something like this. At the top, it would be Amber, and then Surge, and then Lu, and then Buster and Cord. And then after that, I think Nita, Juju, Jackie, and Pearl are the next scariest, with the other tank counters like Griff, B, Maisie, etc. Those are scary but a little bit more manageable I think if you have good jukes, which I know sounds like a lot of brawlers to be wary of, but the thing is, not a lot of people even really go brawlers like Amber, Buster, Cord, or Pearl right now, and Griff, Lu, and Juju are more common only in the higher ranked tiers. For most people, the only brawlers you're really going to see here are things like Surge and Nita. So even if you take Melodie, most people aren't really going to take her counters that often anyways, and you can just target ban the harder counters like Surge or something, maybe Lu or Nita or Griff depending on the map, and then every other brawler not on this list Melodie can work into or steamroll if you play well. As far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty strong brawler. And that brings us then to her best maps and modes from the context of drafting with a pick and ban phase. Now obviously for game modes, she's great on Heist, it's her best game mode, and even though Heist isn't currently in the ranked game mode pool as of me making this video, this isn't a permanent change and we will see the return of Heist eventually, so you are not safe and this part is still relevant. When Heist does eventually make its return, since Melodie is so broken on that game mode, chances are you won't get to play her here since most people know to ban Melodie on this mode. But occasionally people are stupid and forget to ban her, so if you have first pick, you might want to consider leaving it open since you never know, maybe the enemy team will forget to ban it and then you get a free Melodie game. In that case, as the potential Melodie player, you'll want to probably ban a brawler like Amber or Nita, or a really strong sniper like Angela here. And outside of Heist, she's very decent on other game modes too. There's no particular ranking for the game modes for me because I think she has advantages in basically all of them, and it kind of just depends more on a map by map basis. For example, she's pretty good in knockout and bounty just because she is an assassin with a really long range, kind of like Leon is, so even though she doesn't do the most damage at max range, people still tend to give her a ton of space for free if you dodge a couple shots, just because they don't want to feed her any supercharge, right? Kind of like how you do against Baby Meg. And that means that you can get away with playing her on most of these knockout and bounty maps if you can cycle her supers effectively. If I'm playing Melodie, I'll usually just ban a really strong sniper like Piper or Angelo or Gus, since tank counters aren't really picked as much on open maps. You can also ban wall break options on like Hideout, since you'll rely on walls a lot there. Piper, Brock, Griff, or Pearl are really good bans in that scenario. On Kaynel Grand, I will ban Jackie over other options here in particular because she's just broken on this map and is really good in the Melodie, but Kaynel Grand has a lot of walls and water, which makes dashing around difficult, and I wouldn't pick Melodie here in general unless you're doing some goofy Melodie only challenge. And similar to a map with a lot of walls and water, Melodie also does pretty poorly on maps with a lot of grass since she can't sneak, and she's frailer and does less burst than other popular picks on grassy maps, so definitely avoid playing her on a map like Snake Prairie. Do not pick her here unless you want to get your IP address leaked by a raging teammate. For the knockout maps, I'll usually ban either Buster or B. Specifically Flaring Penis, I ban Buster there because people sometimes like to pick him, and on Out in the Open, I might consider banning B because she's kind of used there every now and then as well. Otherwise, I just usually ban like another strong sniper like Piper or Angelo. For our next game mode, we have Brawl Ball, and as most of you probably already know, she's pretty good in this game mode too, since she can juggle the ball in between her legs as she dashes up the map. She can do the same thing in Brawl Hockey, which recently hit ranked as well, and she's a very good pick on that game mode too. I'll usually ban Amber or Surge on Brawl Ball maps. Lou and Griff are scary, but they're not usually picked too often in my experience in this game mode. Your mileage may vary though. Nita is also scary to face as Melodie, but not as scary as Amber or Surge. Amber isn't picked that often though, so if Surge is already banned, feel free to go for Nita ban since she is kind of popular. Other brawlers you don't usually see unless they're sweats. For the next game mode, Melodie is also really good in Hot Zone since she can dash up the map onto the zone with her supers, engage on the backline supports, and she does pretty decent into the tanks that are picked in this game mode too. I usually ban Lou or Surge in this mode, maybe Jackie or Juju on that one map with the Tetris piece. And finally, for the last game mode, we have Gem Grab. She also does pretty good here since she has a lot of teammate potential with that Hypercharge and can turn around games with the help of her super to dash in and out with all the gems. I'll usually ban Amber or Surge on most maps, like in Brawl Ball, just because Gem Grab maps have a lot of grass, so people might pick Amber more often in this game mode, and you will get fucked. But Surge is also really popular as a brawler in general as well, and just cringe on longer games like Gem Grab where people have more chances to level up, so people like to take him a lot. Also a very solid ban to consider if you're playing Melodie. And also, I will just say, don't forget like map-specific bans too, like Rico on Hot Potato on Heist, and Hard Rock Mine and Gem Grab, Juju everywhere, things like that. You know, you want to just keep that in mind based on the meta. Things can change. So now we've gone over her kit, we've gone over her matchups and best game modes, but how do you use all of this in an actual game? Because I feel like with Melodie, all of these different tips and tricks don't really feel that cohesive unless you see them being used together. So let's now go ahead and jump into the recent monthly final that happened this past weekend and see how these different strategies were used by pro players in their games to give you a better sense of how your Melodie play should look like. Starting with this game in Bounty Shooting Star, recently played by Humble and Eclipsar Esports. In this game, Eclipsar takes Max and then they take Piper, who are both pretty good picks on this map. Max in general is just used as a assassin type brawler slash support who can deal with snipers with her faster movement speed, kind of like how Melodie does, and then can use her super to support her team to get more kills and have generally more pressure on the map with the faster speed. Against this, Humble actually decides to take Melodie, who does pretty good into both Max and Piper if she can dodge the enemy's shots. And to try to deal with the Melodie and just have generally more damage on the field, Eclipsar decides to go 8-bit, which I did say earlier was a high DPS long range option that Melodie is generally afraid of. But you'll see in this game that the Melodie player does have some counterplay against brawlers like this because she can dodge their shots with her faster movement speed pretty well. So loading into this game, you see that Boss immediately takes the blue star and then gives his team the advantage, and they take center control. One thing you'll notice too is that, like I said before, Melodie's attack doesn't do a lot of damage, but people are still really afraid of getting hit by it just because they don't want to charge Melodie's super up at all and don't want to feed her. And just this implicit threat of charging Melodie's super has already pushed Eclipsar all the way back into their spawn, and yet Boss is still able to charge his notes off of the enemy 8-bit because he is so slow. Now, Boss is finally charged up to super fully, and now, even though, okay, another thing too is that even though Melodie's super is charged here, the notes are still kind of scary to get hit by just because you don't want to feed Melodie notes, because if you do feed Melodie notes and Melodie has her super, then you're giving her an opportunity then to go in and get a team wipe, right? Not so great. And Boss basically does just that and gets a couple kills on the Max and the 8-bit. Max tries to dash a little bit inside of the ring against Melodie there, but doesn't really quite succeed in doing so that well because, again, Melodie is too fast even for a brawler like Max to actually outmaneuver inside that ring. So it's generally just way too dangerous inside, and it's better to just stay away from that circle. Another thing that good Melodie players do a lot in these games is that they use up all their supers so that they can recharge their super off of nearby enemies or just off of enemies as they walk in on respawn. Here, Boss has recharged his super, so he goes in on the Piper there as he sees an opportunity. Gets the kill on the Piper, and then now he's used up all his supers again, so he can recharge it off of the 8-bit and then goes in with the Hypercharge to get the kill as well. And here you can see that Boss is really doing a really great job of using his attack here now as the enemies walk in from spawn to charge up his super again. And he's also making sure that he has all of his notes up as well, because that's also, again, really key with Melodie to dodge shots and juke well, charging up those notes to make sure that he has the fast movement speed. And here the enemy team's basically given up, and that's the end of round 1. Here again, same plan, try to farm up those notes, try to farm up that super, use the notes with the faster movement speed to dodge shots and wiggle better, while also getting that super so then you can threaten the kill. Also, because Melodie's range is so long, he actually can compete with a Max's range, which is pretty unfortunate for Max here because she does just kind of get boxed out a lot of the time, since Melodie has consistently faster speed than Max with the help of that star power. Here you can see Melodie gets her super off of the Max and then sees Max shoot out 4 shots all at once hitting nothing, which means Max has no ammo at this point, and then Boss can go in and just get the kill for free since Max has no damage to stop her. And here another thing that Boss is doing there is hitting this enemy turret too, which doesn't charge her super but still charges up Melodie's notes, and that's actually still really valuable just because it gives you that extra movement speed. So if you ever face like penny turrets, penny barrels, things like that, those are also good targets to just farm your notes off of too if you can. Here, Boss gets a super and goes in on the enemy team here, gets the Max pretty low, forces the Piper jump, and Piper's also very low, which gives his teammate Angelo so much space to push up and then try to get a kill on the Piper or the Max. Misses a bunch of shots, but ultimately does pick up a kill on the Piper, which also gives Boss more pressure to then recharge her super against the Max. Another thing too with Melodie that you want to do is try to avoid wasting all of your shots before you go in, because Melodie's reload speed isn't that fast and you want to have at least a couple shots on hand for when you go in. Maybe if you don't fully land where you want to with your supers, you can at least use your basic attack to finish people off with that instead. Here, Boss actually makes a mistake and supers in on the 8-bit in a bad pattern. 8-bit is too close to the walls and the water here to actually kill him with the movement with the notes and the supers. So Boss has to do an awkward movement instead, dashing left, which isn't in the counterclockwise motion, doesn't really hit the enemy 8-bit with any of his notes. And here, the 8-bit is actually able to get the kill on the Melodie. And because the Melodie did recharge her super against the 8-bit in the end, she was able to come out of spawn immediately after and get the pinch on the Max. And that basically wraps up this bounty game. For our next game that I want to show you guys, we're going to take it to Brawl Ball and Sneaky Fields with Team Foot, they're named after feet, against Team Electros, which is named after a Pokemon. If you look at the bans, it looks like Electros has banned out Griff, and first picks the Nita, which is a pretty interesting pick. It seems that in their game plan, they might have already been thinking about taking the Melodie in general, because like I said before, Melodie generally struggles against Griff, who is a pretty solid tank counter, and farts out a lot of damage, and Nita Bear can also make Melodie really struggle a lot, so they first picked the Nita, who also is a pretty good tank counter in general. And especially since Foot banned the Surge and the Loot, that actually does clean up a lot of the potential counters that Foot could take if Team Electros took the Melodie. Foot takes Rico and Stu, and then Electros follows that up with a Juju pick, another pet spawning brawler that would do pretty good in the Melodie. And then for their last brawler, they take Melodie, who is, as you know, a pretty solid Brawl Ball brawler, just because she can juggle the ball up the map. For the last pick, Foot decides to take Draco, who is a pretty interesting choice, pretty solid tank overall, really good at staying alive. And since Melodie doesn't do the most amazing damage ever, and since Draco does have that self-healing super, damage reduction on his super, and that gadget, Draco is going to generally be able to stay alive against Melodie pretty well if Electros' Melodie doesn't have her teammates helping. And so jumping into this game, I just want to quickly say, I don't like Enraged Melodie build at all. I don't like Enraged Melodie's build at all. I don't like Enraged's... Fuck, his name is so hard to pronounce. I don't like the Melodie's build at all. The Melodie is using speed gear, which on a grassy map, it kind of makes sense, but Melodie already gets speed from her notes anyways, and it's not like she's really going to be staying in the bushes a lot to begin with, so I really don't see that helping that much. And she's not using shield gear, instead opting, it seems, for gadget gear, which is a really interesting choice. Maybe Electros is expecting this game to go on for a long time, but not really a big fan of dropping the shield gear in general, because you'll see this Melodie dying a lot in cases where I think the Melodie could have potentially survived if she was using health and shield instead, and maybe getting more value out of that. But let me go ahead and rewind the clock a little bit. Let's go back to the start of the game. So off the first engagement, Enrage tries to focus on charging up Melodie's super, which he does, but then ends up wasting it a little bit by just trying to clear the ball. And so now that means that Melodie's actually not going to spawn in with any supers at all, and she's really going to struggle here to stop the enemy team from closing in on them because, like I said, Melodie without super is like a chicken without her wings, cock without the balls, an e-girl without her bathwater. She's basically useless, and Foot gets the first goal pretty comfortably. Here, Melodie's finally got her super back and tries to go for a breakaway goal here. Almost gets it, does get a kill on the Rico, but doesn't quite make it to the finish line. This is the scary part about Melodie in general on a game mode like Brawl Ball. Even if you think you have the advantage and you're up a goal, Melodie can always equalize the goal somehow by just going in on a positioning misplay or an opportunity where she might see to try to super in with the ball, juggle it up the map, and score instantly. Here, Melodie recharges the super with the Hypercharge, tries to go for another breakaway goal, but doesn't quite make it there. Maybe if she had shield gear, the things could have been different. Here, Enrage is basically just focusing on recharging his super. Kind of struggling in general though. Blue team has a really great Rico play though, and it basically ends round 1, before Electros could really do anything with the Melodie at all. Going into the second round here, it looks like Enraged again, just trying to get his super. Unfortunately, it seems like Gyro on the Stu actually manages to disconnect somehow. I don't know what's going on, he just starts standing still. Enraged sees this as an opportunity, supers up, kills the Rico, and just scores the ball for free. And then while Gyro's standing still, Enrage manages to walk up, get a few hits for his super, he gets pretty close, and then he actually manages to charge it by the time Foot comes back. If I was Gyro, I would be quite enraged at this point. And speaking of, the player himself then sees this as an opportunity to go in with his Hypercharge super to push the ball up the map, hopefully to get a goal. I will just point out really quickly, in this super, when Enraged goes in, you'll see that he actually doesn't quite super properly against the enemy Stu up against the wall. It's in the heat of the moment, and it's obviously very difficult to really do properly, but here, if Enraged to super against the wall a little bit more to the left of the Stu, he probably could have gotten the kill here, but instead goes down. You can see that a lot of Melodie's notes actually pass through the Stu because Enraged supered too close to the Stu. It doesn't matter though, because in the end the Nita teammate is able to follow through for Enraged and score the ball anyways. And for the final round, unfortunately, Gyro is still rage quit and disconnected and can't do anything. He's been replaced by a bot, and this gives Team Electros a really great opportunity to get a lot of value, a bunch of supers, which for their team comp that relies a lot on cycling their pets is insanely big and quite unfortunate for Foot. With a bunch of free supers now and a bunch of pressure, Team Electros is able to take mid control pretty comfortably and hold on to it. Naui on the Draco tries to make a breakaway play, does get a trade on the kill, but Team Electros still has a lot of the control. Here, Enraged has his Hypercharge and is looking for an opportunity to make a play, get maybe a kill or a trade on someone. Enraged sees an opportunity and goes for the Hypercharge kill on the Rico. Pretty solid, and then goes in on the Stu as well. Doesn't quite get that kill, but still gets enough pressure and damage to basically let Refresh walk it up into the goal with Juju Shield. That's another thing too to note about playing an Assassin Brawler. Sometimes it's not really even about getting a team wipe or getting all the kills or scoring the ball yourself. Just going in and getting one kill for your life or a kill and some damage on another target with your life, right? Those are positive trades as far as playing an Assassin is concerned, as long as you're doing it on the enemy side and taking that space for your team. Here, Melodie is able to again just recharge her super, pick up the ball, and go in yet again, and able to score the goal in a breakaway play. Foot, unfortunately, just were not able to stop that. Brawl IQ maybe was a little bit rattled after the early disconnects from the Stu. Unfortunate. And here for our next game, I actually want to take us into the match point game against Foot and Electron again, this time on Hot Zone and Open Business. Foot this time are looking to get some payback for that round they lost in Brawl Ball, and Electron are actually going to be looking to recreate the success with the Melodie again in their match point game. For the bans, you can see that Electros actually has Melodie in mind as they ban out Griff and Amber, who is specifically a good Melodie counter. And Foot Esports here, it bans out the Lu, which means that Melodie does have some opportunity here to do pretty good without too many counters on the field. Electros first picks the Stu, a pretty safe, strong play, pretty good on this map in general. Foot counter picks with Janet, as well as Nita, the Janet being a very safe play and really strong as well, and Nita being a more interesting pick, who also can be very oppressive and good against tanks if she can cycle her super. Also, the pet is going to be really good against the Stu, who relies on hitting enemy targets and not bears in order to cycle his supers. Electros follows up with the Juju pick, who is just generally really good everywhere as being an unkillable demon, and then last picks the Melodie for their team, which is a curious pick, especially against the enemy team's Nita. Nita does pretty good in the Melodie, and Foot has taken the Nita, plus Nita also has a pretty good matchup into the Stu as well, so this can get pretty dangerous for Electros depending on Foot Esports' last pick. And Foot decides to pick the Draco, a really solid tank on Hot Zone in particular. I've mentioned this before, and I said this on my second channel too, check that out, but Draco is really good at just staying alive forever and never dying, and that is basically what you want to do with Hot Zone. That's all you can really ask for from a tank. So this time, Melodie decides to go for the shield gear, which is a lot better than in that previous Brawl Ball game in my opinion, but still keeping the gadget gear I think as far as I can tell. Here, Melodie just gets her first super and gets a quick double kill, one against the Draco with a couple series of really good supers, and one against the Janet, which he helps pinch out with the Stew. Really solid intro to begin with, a couple really good kills, and now has used up all their supers so she can recharge as the enemies are walking back out of spawn. Kind of like what I said before, even if you don't recharge your supers with your supers directly, getting a kill in general at all is actually really good for taking positioning and then hitting people as they come back out of spawn. Here with the Hypercharge super, Enraged goes in again on the Janet, but Janet is able to fly out to safety. One more super in hand, uses it on the Nita to take her out, and then takes control of the center zone. Things are looking pretty good so far. Here, Draco goes in and essentially suicides to give his blue team a lot more favorable positioning, and that's actually somehow given blue team a lot of the zone. And this in particular is where I think Enraged kind of struggles because he doesn't have health gear on. You can see he's really low right now, sitting in the back being pushed back by the Nita and the Janet turret, but isn't really able to heal because as soon as he takes out the damage turret, the Nita hits him and then he can't heal, and that actually charges the Nita super, which then Nita has the shield gadget on. And of course, Melodie really struggles to take out that Nita bear with her notes, so she ends up being pushed back a lot and being forced to attack as well, and then can't heal as she goes in. She still managed to get a couple really great kills though, utilizing those notes in a pretty impressive fashion to get a couple kills. And then with the mid taken back now, Melodie has an opportunity to recharge her super as the enemies are coming back out of spawn. She gets her Hypercharge super, goes for the Janet, but doesn't quite get the kill because Janet is unkillable and she has her super, and then Melodie ends up actually going down for that play. Here, Hypercharge Nita Bear is basically chasing the Juju around the map because Juju can't take out the bear at all, and Melodie also can't take out the bear, and this is where I think the Nita pick really starts to shine. It's like taking candy from a baby. The bear is just way too beefy and burly to be dealt with by either the Juju or the Melodie, and that secures Foot the round. Here, Enraged makes a much more aggressive play, just trying to get his super immediately off the bat. Not sure if that's really that recommended, he probably only got a few hits off, and his whole team loses the first engagement off of that. And that kind of highlights the difference between a good aggressive play with an assassin and a relatively bad one. A good aggressive play with an assassin is when you can at least trade your life out for some significant value, like either positioning or a kill on the enemy team, but Enraged was unable to get the kill on the Janet there at the end, and him pushing in there didn't even get his teammates any positioning either, because the Draco on the enemy team was actually way pushed up as well, forcing the Stew to fall back and try to pinch out the Draco with the Juju. So here, Enraged off the next life is playing a little bit more passively, trying not to die this time while charging up his super. He gets a super but does feed the Janet super in the meantime, and here we can see yet again, no health gear makes Enraged really struggle to heal up, especially against Janet's harassment with her turret, and funnily enough, Enraged even has to use a gadget here to try to preserve as much HP as he can before he goes in. Gets Naui pretty low on the Draco, and is able to then, with his teammates, help pinch out the Nita here to secure the zone, but at this point, Foot is looking really good with a 50% lead. Here, Enraged yet again isn't able to heal back up to full without the health gear, and that also means he doesn't get to activate his shield gear either, although Melodie does manage to charge her next super as they come in. And then he supers in with the help of his gadget and Hypercharge as well, and does manage to take out the Nita. He uses his last gadget here to secure the kill on the enemy Janet, but that was kind of not really the greatest use either, because here he goes in and doesn't have the HP and just dies immediately to the Nita and the enemy Draco. And here on respawn, Janet is able to Hypercharge to push the Stew and the Juju off the map. Enraged doesn't really have many tools at his disposal here, no HP, no gadgets, no bit. He ends up taking a massive egg to the face from the enemy Janet, and he goes down, and that wraps up the hot zone game, and gives Foot the victory. In this case, it wasn't so much that Enraged's build lost in the game or anything, it was mostly probably just that the team comp they had didn't really fare that well against Draco and Nita. Nita Bear, which was able to just take so much pressure for Foot's team and push them all the way back. Janet's turret able to prevent the enemy team from healing at all. And Draco in general just being an unkillable demon, really excelling at hot zone in general. While Melodie and the Stew both got a lot of kills, it doesn't really matter if Foot just keeps running in over and over again off respawn and takes up all the zone time. So far in the pro games we've covered, we've only really shown Melodie's really aggressive playstyles, but I wanted to take a moment into this next bounty game Shooting Star again with Humble versus this time Team Heretics to showcase an actually really passive Melodie game where the stats aren't that impressive, but the Melodie is still able to utilize a more passive playstyle instead of an aggressive one to get a lot of value for her team. And this is something you're gonna have to do if you ever play Melodie against brawlers that she's not so good into, or if she just gets plain out ranged, even against her good matchups. Let's take a look. You can see here Boss again has a pretty decent matchup against the Sprout in theory, but against the Gus and the RT, who both have a lot of damage at long range, Boss might struggle in general to get his super at all this game just because he gets outranged by all three of the brawlers on the enemy team. Still though, Humble are able to take the blue star off the beginning because Red team really don't want to feed the Melodie any supercharge at all, and they're willing to give up the blue star to avoid feeding him too many hits. Here, another thing to note too is that Boss is using the shield gear on Melodie but isn't using the health gear, and that's actually not that bad in this situation because Jean has the healing Puff Star power, which actually is able to help keep Boss healthy and then recharge that shield gear faster. Instead, Boss is actually going for the gadget gear, expecting this game to go on for a long time. Your boss gets kind of out of position here after Jean dies, but he's able to use the movement speed from 2 nodes to wiggle like an absolute madman and dodge every single shot that comes his way, which actually forces the whole enemy team back because they've wasted too much ammo on absolutely nothing, and now boss has all the positioning for his team. A pretty insane movement play. Here, boss actually switches lane along with the red team's lane swap to try to keep Melodie on the enemy Sprout, even though Melodie doesn't have her super. Boss here actually decides to rotate around and cover for the Piper, who jumps out and is in a bad spot, able to take the heat off the Piper and onto herself from the Gus and the Sprout to prevent the Piper from getting hit by 3 people at once and dying, while getting a super in the process from the enemy Sprout. A pretty solid positioning team play. And now with super, boss is looking to get a couple notes so that he can find an opportunity to go in on an enemy target. Boss gets really close here to the enemy Gus, gets a couple notes here, 3 notes in fact, and sees an opportunity now to go in on the enemy Sprout instead, which actually is really crucial here because if you notice, in the last few seconds of the countdown in Bounty, the whole red team here is looking to push blue team back into their spawn to try to get at least 1 kill using all this pressure. But with Piper getting a few nasty taps, Gus and RT are both really low, and so they actually need their Sprout to come in who's still healthy to actually take the pressure off of the Piper and try to get their team a few kills. But boss instead goes in on the very healthy Sprout, who now can't cover for his low HP teammates, and this means that both RT and Gus can't really go in without just dying to the Piper, and the Sprout ends up getting pushed all the way back by the Melodie in the end. Overall, a really well played game by boss. Despite getting absolutely no kills this game at all and only ever taking blue star, he was able to utilize his positioning really well to save his teammates' lives twice, which ultimately led to their victory. A classic case of stats not really reflecting true in-game value. It seems in the second round, Team Heretics are a little more rattled here. This time, Sprout ends up staying a little too close to the Melodie and ends up feeding a couple hits and blue star, which gives Humble really good forward positioning here, and they're able to take a lot of space. Melodie then gets a couple good hits against the RT, really close to her super now, despite RT getting a couple good hits back and forcing boss to back out. Boss gets the last hit of his super against the enemy Gus, and now is actually looking to make a forward positioning play with the super, but doesn't even need to because Semantic on the Jean ends up getting a really nice pull on the Sprout, but rather than going in here to try to finish out the other 2 kills using their player advantage, he actually falls back to support his Gus and body block for him because Semantic is really low and RT and Gus are both pushing up 2 forward. But in the process of Jean falling back and healing to safety, boss actually sees that Gus has wasted a couple critical shots and his shield on someone else, which means he's now vulnerable to getting dove on, which boss goes for and gets the kill. And then after having used 2 supers here, boss has 1 more additional super that he wants to get rid of so he can start cycling his next super, and he sees the RT right next to him, and he decides to go for an aggressive play to kill the RT instead of wasting the super by just falling back. But what does end up happening is that by supering up 2 forward, he actually ends up being vulnerable to the Sprout, who is respawned by this point and gets the follow-up kill on boss. Still though, Humble does have the star advantage, so they're still able to play pretty passively here while forcing the enemy team Heretics to push up instead. And that's pretty important for boss here because boss actually isn't able to charge a super against 3 brawlers who all outrange him with the map this open, and they're forced too far back away from the unbreakable walls to really rely on those to take cover either. So boss now has to purely rely on just juking and can't really bait shots as much. Still though, Jean is able to use his super to threaten a pull, and that actually keeps the whole enemy team back pretty hard. Boss here uses his Hypercharge to get a little bit of a speed boost to try to go for a couple aggressive plays to get a super. He ends up getting it and gets a pretty not so elegant kill against the Sprout. When enemies are up against a wall like this, it's actually really hard with Melodie to use the super to hit your notes better. Not the cleanest kill, but still boss manages to clinch it out in the end, and blue team gets the kill on the Gus as well, finishing out the round in favor of Team Humble. And so just as a quick summary from these pro matches, what I wanted to highlight are the general game plan with Melodie. You want to get your notes, movement is everything, right? You were able to see how pro Melodies were able to juke a lot of shots using that extra movement speed and maintain a lot of their forward positioning that way for their team. And while in the process of getting your notes, you're also looking to get your super too, which are just important as your notes. And with that super in hand, people are going to really start respecting your space a lot, because if you have any notes, you're going to be able to threaten getting a kill, which will take a lot more positioning for your team. Even without your super though, your attacks in general just have a lot of implied threat, because charging Melodie's super at all is really scary. Letting Melodie farm her notes up at all when she has her super charged is really scary too. So Melodie's attack in general is actually a lot scarier than what the damage itself suggests. And once you've taken that forward space with poking, your movement speed to dodge attacks and waste enemies' ammo, and supers to push up and reposition yourself, you'll want to look for a good opportunity where an enemy gets too out of position, or if they waste a lot of shots, because that's when you can go in for the free kill with Melodie's HP and gadgets. Assassins in general specialize in diving on one target and getting a kill using either high mobility or some other way to close the gap on enemies, and that kill will then allow the assassin's teammates to push up and get more kills with the player advantage as a 3v2. Assassins don't have to be all like Fang Supers or Mortis Hyperchargers, getting a team wipe, right? Just getting one kill, potentially even trading your life out for one, can be enough to turn the tides of a team fight in your team's favor. But fortunately for you, Melodie is one of those brawlers who actually can team wipe pretty consistently, especially if she has her Hypercharge up. And to effectively get a hypercharge and cycle those supers, remember to try to use up all your supers remaining to help charge your next one. And also, when you go in, try to make sure you have some ammo. Your reload speed isn't that fast, so if you use all of it, you won't have it after you dash in. A common strategy that I personally like to do is just dashing up once for positioning, maybe dodge a shot or two to waste the enemy's ammo, and then shoot maybe once or twice to get your notes up, dash back in again once or twice, and then start slapping up the enemy with your notes, plus the shield gadget. You can play around with this a little bit, try to find a combination that works best for you. And also, for a final few thoughts that I wasn't able to mention in the play-by-play, you do the same thing with Melodie in a lot of different game modes, but in Heist in particular, after you get a kill and take space, try to look for an opportunity to then get on the safe to deal damage. If you die in the process of getting safe damage, it's actually not that big of a deal, as long as you get a few hits for your super to help recharge your next one, because then you can immediately go back in on the safe again and again. On other game modes though, it's more important when you get a kill to try to keep that positioning and hold it for your team so that they or you can potentially get follow-up kills after that. If you want more specific matchup related tips like how to balance an aggressive versus passive playstyle, you can check out my Cord video I did. I had a more in-depth explanation of aggressive versus passive gameplay there with the help of Toxic Genie, so be sure to check that out. But besides that, that's gonna wrap it up for this Melodie video. This took me way fucking longer than I meant for it to take, and I'm sorry I haven't been uploading. I've been struggling a lot with striving for perfection with these videos, but that's basically just turned my workflow into wasting a bunch of time editing and re-editing the same things over and over again. So moving forward, I'm gonna just try to take it a little easier and upload whatever, like maybe once a week or every other week if I can. Hopefully I don't ever spend weeks on a single script like this ever again. If you are someone who's been around since the start of my channel and missed the more chill commentary videos and want more frequent uploads, you should check out my second channel. I'm doing daily uploads there at the moment. We'll see how long I can keep that up. But at the very least, the uploads there are more consistent than on this channel, and I'm still doing some informational style content there too. It's basically just stuff that I don't have the time to make a full video on this channel for. I'll just talk at a camera for like 20 minutes and throw it over on the second channel instead. Also, I'm currently doing some streams of me pushing to ranked, and once I hit pro, if that happens, I'm thinking of getting back on the guide grind set and finally finish all those videos I promised to make months ago but never got around to doing. Stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe. Yes, like and subscribe. Thank you to all my tier 2 and 3 supporters. You help make videos like these possible. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far, I just want to say I love your shirt today. It looks very stylish. It looks fabulous on you. Take care of yourselves, guys. I love you. Goodbye. Mwah.